The will said my sister's mine to raise, but my brother has always been the responsible one. Rowan had always been the dependable sibling, the one their parents could count on to take charge in difficult situations. At 26, he was established in his career, financially stable, and ready to take on any responsibility that came his way. His younger sister, Tessa, on the other hand, was the more free-spirited one. At 24, she was pursuing her artistic passions, working as a freelance photographer and living in the moment. Their lives took a drastic turn when their parents unexpectedly passed away, leaving them to figure out the future of their much younger 10-year-old sister, Corinne. The three siblings were close-knit growing up, though Rowan and Tessa had always had a typical sibling dynamic filled with competitiveness, love, and the occasional argument. But despite their differences, Rowan always took on the role of protector, especially when it came to Corinne, who had been born much later and was treated as the baby of the family. The unexpected death of their parents was a crushing blow, leaving them not only grief-stricken but also uncertain about the future. With both Rowan and Tessa being adults, the question of Corinne's guardianship came into focus. Rowan, being the responsible older brother, naturally assumed that he would step in to take care of Corinne. After all, he had the financial means and the stability necessary to provide for her. But when the will was read, they were both shocked. Their father had named Tessa as Corinne's legal guardian. Rowan felt a flood of emotions, anger, confusion, and even betrayal. Why would their father choose Tessa over him, especially when Rowan had always been the one to step up when things got tough? Tessa, on the other hand, was equally stunned. She had always looked up to Rowan as the leader of their small family unit, the one who would take the reins in times of crisis. Now, she was being thrust into a role she felt unprepared for, a role she never imagined she would have to take on. For Rowan, the revelation felt like a slap in the face. He had always been the steady, dependable one, the one his parents relied on for big decisions and guidance. He had a well-paying job in finance, lived in a nice apartment, and had even been planning to buy a house, one that he had envisioned would be perfect for Corinne to grow up in. So why then did their father choose Tessa, the free-spirited, artistic sibling who was still figuring out her own life? The will was clear. Their father had named Tessa as Corinne's legal guardian, citing her close relationship with their younger sister as the main reason for his decision. While Rowan and Corinne were close, Tessa had always been the more emotionally available sibling, the one Corinne went to when she needed someone to talk to. It wasn't that Rowan wasn't close with Corinne, but his job had kept him busy, and he sometimes felt more like an authority figure than an older brother. Still, Rowan couldn't shake the feeling that their father's decision was a mistake. As the days passed, Rowan's feelings of betrayal grew. He started replaying conversations he'd had with his father over the years, wondering if there had been some sign that his father didn't trust him as much as he thought. Was it something he had said or done? Or worse, something he hadn't done? The thought gnawed at him, keeping him up at night. On the other side of the coin, Tessa was grappling with her own emotions. She had never imagined being in this position, and while she loved Corinne dearly, she didn't feel ready for the responsibility of being her legal guardian. Tessa had always been more laid back, choosing a career in the arts that allowed her to travel and work on her own terms. She had never been one for routine or long-term commitments, which was why her father's decision came as such a surprise to her. In her heart, Tessa felt like Rowan should have been the one named as Corinne's guardian. He was the responsible one, the one with a stable job and a plan for the future. She, on the other hand, was still figuring things out. But now, she was faced with the reality of her father's decision and the weight of the responsibility that came with it. The guilt of taking on a role she felt Rowan was better suited for was eating away at her. Tessa also knew that Rowan was hurting, even if he wasn't saying it out loud. She could see it in the way he avoided eye contact when they talked about their parents' will, the way his jaw clenched when they discussed Corinne's future. She hated the idea that their father's decision might drive a wedge between them, but she didn't know how to fix it. The responsibility had been thrust upon her, and now she had to figure out how to handle it without letting her brother's resentment grow. As Rowan and Tessa struggled with their new reality, the truth behind their father's decision began to unravel. It started with a conversation between Rowan and a family friend, someone who had been close to their father, and who had some insight into his final decisions. Rowan, still grappling with his feelings of betrayal, confided in the family friend about how hurt he was by their father's decision. The friend, knowing the full story, hesitated but ultimately decided to share what he knew. It turned out that their father had overheard a conversation between Rowan and one of his friends a few months before his death. In that conversation, Rowan had mentioned something about leaving the family. Their father, who only heard part of the conversation, had misunderstood Rowan's words and thought that he was planning to distance himself from the family, possibly even moving away to pursue his career. In reality, Rowan had been working on a secret project that he planned to reveal to his family as a surprise. He had been offered a prestigious job opportunity abroad, one that would significantly increase his income and allow him to provide a better life for his family. His plan had been to surprise his parents with the news and to bring Corinne with him to give her the best possible education and life experiences. But their father, hearing only part of the conversation, had assumed the worst. Believing that Rowan was planning to leave the family behind, their father had made the difficult decision to name Tessa as Corinne's guardian. He had wanted to ensure that Corinne would be cared for by someone who would stay close, someone who wouldn't leave her behind. When Rowan learned the truth, he was devastated. His father had died thinking that he was going to abandon the family, all because of a misunderstanding. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks, and the weight of the miscommunication felt unbearable. Rowan's discovery left him reeling. Not only had his father misunderstood his intentions, but that misunderstanding had led to a decision that now left him feeling even more disconnected from his family. He couldn't shake the guilt of knowing that his father had died without knowing the full truth, and that guilt began to eat away at him. Tessa, meanwhile, was grappling with her own emotions. She now understood why their father had made the decision he had, but it didn't make things any easier. She felt an overwhelming sense of guilt for being named Corinne's guardian when Rowan had clearly been the more suitable choice. She knew that Rowan was struggling, and she didn't know how to fix it. Tessa found herself torn between stepping up to fulfill her father's wishes and stepping aside to let Rowan take on the role that he had always seemed destined for. But the will was legally binding, and changing the guardianship wasn't a simple matter. In the meantime, Rowan and Tessa had to navigate their new roles in the family. Despite his hurt feelings, Rowan couldn't turn his back on Corinne. He loved her dearly and wanted to be a part of her life, even if he wasn't her legal guardian. He began helping Tessa with the day-to-day responsibilities of caring for Corinne, but there was always an underlying tension between them. As for Corinne, the youngest sibling, she was struggling with her own grief. At just 10 years old, she had lost both of her parents and was now being raised by her older siblings. While she loved both Rowan and Tessa, she could sense the tension between them, and it made her feel even more uncertain about her future. Corinne had always been close to both of her siblings, but in different ways. Rowan had been her protector, the one who made sure she was safe and taken care of. Tessa, on the other hand, had been her confidant, the one she could talk to about her feelings and fears. Now, she found herself caught in the middle of their silent conflict. Despite the tension, Rowan and Tessa both did their best to shield Corinne from the complexity of the situation. They didn't want her to feel like she was the cause of their disagreements, and they both loved her too much to let their issues affect her well-being. Over time, Rowan and Tessa began to find a way to work together. Rowan, while still hurt by their father's decision, realized that Tessa was just as overwhelmed as he was. He began to see that they were both trying their best in a difficult situation, and that their father's misunderstanding wasn't Tessa's fault. Tessa, on the other hand, came to realize that she couldn't handle everything on her own. While she had been named Corinne's legal guardian, she understood that Rowan had much more experience when it came to responsibility and providing stability. Gradually, they began to share the load of raising their younger sister, working together to give Corinne the best possible upbringing despite their initial challenges. One night, after a particularly long day of handling school issues with Corinne, Tessa and Rowan sat down together in the kitchen. The tension between them had eased over time, but there was still an unspoken wall between them. Tessa finally broke the silence. "Rowan, I know this whole thing has been unfair to you. I never wanted this. I never asked for it," she confessed, tears welling up in her eyes. "You should have been Corinne's guardian. You're better at this than I am. I'm just trying not to screw things up." Rowan sighed, rubbing his temples as he thought about everything that had happened since their parents' death. "Tess, I know, but it's not your fault. I don't understand why Dad thought I would abandon you and Corinne. I've spent every day since we lost them feeling like I failed somehow." Tessa wiped her tears and nodded. "I heard what the family friend told you about Dad's misunderstanding. I wish he had known the full story. But Rowan, I think deep down, Dad still trusted you. He was just scared. He wasn't trying to hurt you. He was just trying to protect Corinne in the only way he knew how." Rowan leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of his sister's words sink in. It had been months of him holding on to that resentment, feeling betrayed by his father's final decision. But in that moment, he realized something. His father's actions had been driven by love, even if they were misguided. "You're right," Rowan said quietly. I was planning something big for the family, something that would change everything. I never got the chance to tell him, and now he's gone. It just eats at me that he thought I'd leave you all behind." Tessa looked at him with understanding in her eyes. "What was it? What were you planning?" Rowan hesitated for a moment, then decided it was finally time to reveal the secret he'd been keeping. "I had been offered a job abroad, a huge opportunity. I wanted to take Corinne with me so she could get the best education, live somewhere new, see the world. I was going to surprise you and Mom and Dad, but before I could, everything changed." Tessa's eyes widened as she absorbed the news. "Rowan, that's incredible. But you never told us? Why didn't you tell me?" "I wanted it to be perfect," Rowan admitted. "I wanted to give us all a fresh start, but Dad never knew, and now I feel like I'll never get that chance." Tessa reached across the table and placed her hand on Rowan's. "You're still here though. You haven't left us. And I know Corinne is lucky to have both of us. You're not a failure, Rowan. Dad just didn't know the full story, but we do now, and we have to do right by Corinne." Rowan nodded, feeling a sense of closure begin to form in his heart. The misunderstanding between him and his father could never be resolved, but he could still honor his parents by being the best brother he could be. With that heart-to-heart, things between Rowan and Tessa began to shift. Instead of feeling resentful about the situation, Rowan threw himself fully into helping Tessa raise Corinne. He realized that he didn't need to be her legal guardian to be a significant part of her life. Tessa, too, found new confidence in her role. Though she had felt overwhelmed at first, she began to step into her responsibilities with a sense of purpose. She realized that their father had chosen her for a reason. Her emotional connection with Corinne had always been strong, and her father had trusted her to provide the love and guidance Corinne would need as she grew older. The two siblings worked together as a team, balancing each other's strengths and weaknesses. Rowan took charge of the practical side of things, finances, schooling, and long-term planning, while Tessa focused on the emotional aspects of raising Corinne, being the nurturing, comforting presence she needed. Together, they created a stable environment for their younger sister, one filled with love, support, and understanding. As for Corinne, she began to thrive under the care of both her siblings. Though she missed their parents deeply, she found comfort in knowing that Rowan and Tessa were always there for her. They became her rock, her safety net, and her role models. As the years passed, Rowan and Tessa continued to raise Corinne together. They navigated the challenges of parenthood, school projects, teenage angst, and all the ups and downs that came with raising a child. Through it all, their bond as siblings grew stronger. Rowan eventually decided not to take the job abroad. While the opportunity had been tempting, he realized that his place was with his family. He found a similar opportunity closer to home, one that allowed him to stay near Corinne and Tessa while still advancing in his career. Tessa, inspired by her experience raising Corinne, began to find more stability in her own life. She continued her photography work, but also took on a more structured role as a mentor for young artists. She had learned a lot about responsibility and commitment through her journey as Corinne's guardian, and those lessons carried over into her career and personal growth. Corinne, now a teenager, grew into a kind, intelligent, and well-rounded young woman. She excelled in school and developed a passion for the arts, much like her sister, but she also inherited Rowan's sense of responsibility and determination. With the love and support of both her siblings, she knew she could achieve anything she set her mind to. In the end, the siblings realized that while their father's decision had initially caused confusion and pain, it had ultimately brought them closer together. The misunderstanding that had driven a wedge between Rowan and their father was something they couldn't change, but Rowan had come to terms with it. He knew that his father had acted out of love, and that was what mattered most. Rowan and Tessa had become more than just siblings. They were a team, united in their love for Corinne and their commitment to honoring their parents' legacy. They had navigated the complexities of their family dynamics, and in doing so, had created a new future for themselves, one built on love, trust, and understanding. Their parents may have been gone, but the bond they had created lived on in Rowan, Tessa, and Corinne. Together, they were a family, stronger than ever before.